Good morning, guys. This is Armendariz, the owner of Canine Learning Academy, and I am streaming live right into our group as well as YouTube to answer the questions that I posted in a Facebook post in our group a little earlier on this month. We're going to do this once a month. So if you post a question, we're going to answer it live. If you want to skip most of the other questions and go directly to your question, you can find that on YouTube. They'll be in chapters and I'll be able to go through your questions there. So welcome to February. So all of these questions were posted in the group in January. So I'm going to go through the question. I'm going to read the question to you and then I'll respond. This is live. So if you are watching live and you happen to have another question, I will be going through at the very end to answer any of those questions. So we're going to be doing a live Q&A once a month. If you've got a question, put the letter Q with the colon in the comments when you're watching this, and I will respond live. Otherwise, I'm going to read you the questions that we had throughout the month. Now, the reason that we're sharing this live with you is because you're not the only one to have a question, and you're going to hear really quickly how redundant some of the questions are. So there is no question that is dumb, okay? Answer or ask any question you'd like, no matter how old your dog is. Now, some things that you can do to help answer your question a little bit better is to tell me a little bit more about your dog's age, your dog's breed, where they live. So if you live in a high rise or a complex, if you know what the trigger is, instead of just saying a dog, you can say a large dog about 75 pounds staring at my dog. Or if I say, if you tell me what distance, that all really does make a difference, because those are the questions that we would normally ask when we are talking to you in a consultation on the phone. Now, if I answer your question, it's going to be a brief, answer response. But if you want to know more deep of what to do exactly, feel free to set up an appointment with us and we will give you a call and go over the details. So let's jump in. If you're watching live, if you type a little comment like hello, I will be able to see your comment. All right, so I'm going to start off with one of the questions here, and I'm reading right on our Facebook group in the Canine Learning Academy Tricks and Training Tip group. One from Belinda that says, biggest challenge lately is launching at me. So her dog is adolescent right now and biting while they're playing or not, she says. And when I walk towards him, sometimes he has a fit and starts barking at me. Okay. So first of all, common question for puppies. This Belinda's dog is adolescent. So I want to say pre-puberty, but going through puberty, still teething, right? So let me go through and respond the way that I would if we were on the phone. Good morning. So there is a good morning. All right. So let me ask, first of all, let me introduce you to the puppy I have here. This is Miss Lucy Pearl. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because you'll see that she's passed out. Oh, good. She fell asleep. Awesome. She is in her pen, right? All by herself and learning to be alone, which is really important for puppies and adolescent dogs. So here is your response, Belinda. When it comes to what your dog is doing that is inappropriate, right? Or you just don't want it to happen anymore. In this case, biting on you, we go through this list. So Julie and I will normally say, okay, we want you to understand why. So why would this be happening? And the reason you want to understand why it's happening is because you're going to come from a place of understanding when you go to putting the training together. You're going to have a place of understanding of how many repetitions or how to be patient. So in this case, when it comes to your puppy biting or she said biting or grabbing, biting while playing, or even when you're chilled, if you say, okay, why would this be happening? I would say to you to understand something might be going on medically. So something medically might be going on with your pup. Could be a stomach issue. It can be a bladder infection. It could be they're teething. It could be just uncomfortable. Adolescent dogs tend to go a little bit over the top. So things are sometimes just a little extreme, kind of like, I wouldn't say a 2-year-old tantrum, but let's just say a teenager that doesn't get their way. You also have a dog that is in teething. So although your dog's lost their puppy teeth, their adult teeth are starting to settle in, and that really hurts. If you've ever had work done on your teeth, the next couple days can be not very comfortable, right? And for that reason, they're more irritable, and it feels good for them to put something in their mouth. So if it happens to be you, in the long run, Belinda, if you want your dog to be calmly sitting on your lap, just chilling, looking at you like you're the best thing in the world, you're going to want to make sure that you're patient with your dog and not break your bond that you currently have. Meaning, don't do anything over the top yourself for them doing what they normally do. This is how puppies and dogs are. They use their mouth. Just like a 2-year-old, they're going to put things in their mouth. Now, when a puppy, just like a 2-year-old, gets tired, they're more irritable and they're more likely to chomp on you, grab your clothes. I had an episode this morning. Oh, here she is. She's looking at the camera with Miss Lucy Pearl. After our training session, she started to get a little bit over the top, right? And we had already done a full session. So we did, a minute here, and then I put her down and I started playing with the toy. I do a toy trade game. So I play a lot of, this is as far as training goes, Belinda, what you want to do. So you first come from a place of understanding. It's either teething, they're tired, they're irritable, or the adolescence. So the hormones and stuff like that. That is why this is happening. What you do next is management. Just like Miss Lucy is right here, she is inside her pen. She is tired. She could be irritable. She was actually at the end of her session being really bitey, which is fine. She's teething, and she wasn't taking the toys that I was presenting. So to me, that tells me she needs space away from me or I'm going to get hurt. And I've got no cuts from this puppy, right? It's been 11 days. So I am not using my hands when she is really biting hard. I'm using my hands and I'm typically have a toy on them. If she grabs my clothes, I grab a toy and I wiggle it. So as far as training goes, so management, you're going to be putting your dog, Belinda, back in an X pen or away from you so that your dog cannot practice this unwanted behavior. Instead, training-wise, you want to teach your dog how to drop, how to leave it, meaning when they're about to do something, stop doing it, right? How to drop. If your dog has something in their mouth, you want them to be able to drop it, including your shirt. All right. You also want to teach your dog how to go to a mat. And until your dog is trained to do that at a high level, you're going to be using management such as we have here with Miss Lucy Pearl. All right, we're using management to keep that distance away when needed. And when she's taking her nap and she's all done, I'll bring her back up and we'll do it again. So training wise, here's what you'll want to teach your dog in a way where they can do it through the levels of the leveling up. So not just in your home, but you're going to eventually take that training out into the front yard, backyard. You're going to do lots of repetition and practice until your dog happily does these 3 things: drop, leave it, and go to a mat, meaning can get away from you. All right. So those are the 3 things that I would train to a level so well that your dog loves to do them. If you say drop it, they happily drop it because you've done so many repetitions. Hopefully that answers your question. Once you've done that training, you can then start to remove management and you can bring your dog all in closer to you. Another thing that you want to do is you want to teach your dog to relax and chill with you. So one other training I would suggest, Belinda, is to, when you have a chew or a bone, you're going to offer your dog the bone and at the same time offer some gentle petting on the back end. Now, if your dog stops and looks at you, I would stop petting. So we want to basically teach your dog that sitting down, chilling with you is rewarding. You've got your bone with you, but also petting can be rewarding too. So you want to change the way your dog feels about being pet by you. All right. And that's with not putting your dog in place. If your dog comes to you, they want to be next to you. And if your dog is biting and nipping at you and barking at you, you're just way too close. All right. So let me know by dropping it in the comment if that answered your question. I'll come back around and make sure I got all of your parts of your question. All right. So that was the question. What was the question? That was Belinda's question. Her dog is lunging and biting. All right. Next question I'm going to answer live is this question is from, where is this one? Carol Martin. My 1-year-old, thank you for telling me the age, golden doodle guards. So guards is defined as usually growling, lunging, whale eyes, but basically not comfortable with you being near the dog when they've got something, or they take the object and they run away. So he grabs things to chew like socks and aggressively guards when we try to take it away. Okay, so guarding, most likely being vocal, not quite sure. Have tried to leave it. So she's tried to use the leave it cue, but usually resorts to trading the item with a treat. Good job there. So that your dog doesn't ingest the pieces of foreign object. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Great question. We see this a lot. Especially a dog coming from puppy into adolescent. There's a lot of learned behavior here. So number one, thank you for posting this question. This is going to be one that's very common. Dogs that guard. Socks, she used aggressively guard. So I asked her a couple questions. And yeah, she hasn't responded. So here we go. So if you go from a place of understanding, we got a question from Kaylee. So start off with understanding, why would a dog guard? Guard meaning, why would a dog take an object and run away or growl and lunge at you if you try to take it from them? So understand why. So we go back to, could be a medical. Once you understand why, then you're going to put some training together. So always go from why. Why is this happening? We've got an adolescent dog. So we've got a dog that maybe is not feeling 100% all the time. Things are always changing, a little over the top. We also have specifically the breed. Sometimes the golden retrievers are a little mouthy, right? They like to retrieve and put things in their mouth. It feels good. It feels like they're doing their job. So you might want to look at, what does your dog like to do? It might be the breed. It might be a specific puppy. We can also imagine when I'm picking a puppy for a pet parent and I'm looking at a litter of dogs, I will look for that one. I will look to see if a dog takes a toy. I'll ask the breeder, can you put a toy down? If the dog takes the toy and moves away, or if the dog takes the toy and offers it to another dog. Now, sometimes these guarding can be a trait that's passed on genetically from one generation to the other. It could be something that the puppy learned when he was with the litter mates, right? A dog can learn to take a toy and move it over to the side so that the other dog doesn't take off with it. And then they learn to guard. Also, a lot of puppies in the home, when a dog gets a chance or a puppy gets a chance to be in the living area, not in their pen, which has only their things, and they accidentally grab a sock. If you're a pet parent that walks towards your dog while your dog is checking out something and puts your hand, so imagine a little puppy and this is their interaction with you. You're coming over and you're putting your hand towards the puppy's mouth and you're pulling something that the dog is trying to process and get to know, get familiar with. Well, then your approach, your hand moving towards a puppy becomes something your puppy learns to avoid or run away. So I'm not quite sure, and these are the questions I would ask you, but understanding why this is happening can make you feel like, okay, well, then that makes sense. Let me go through trying to train that. So those are several different reasons of why this could be happening. It could be genetics. It could be the age. It could be something that makes your dog feel comfortable. It could be a learned reason why, because they've seen you approach with your hand before. In your puppy's mind or your dog's mind, it could mean that it's a game, right? You've maybe played chase 1 or 2 times, or maybe the kids did. And for that reason, your dog has learned this behavior. Now, what do you do about it? The next thing you want to do is manage. So right now, if you're just jumping on, we're talking about a question about guarding. So this dog is guarding and I'm answering this question live. So once you understand why, next is to understand how to manage it. Management. So we've got a dog that stole a sock. Management means to me, put your socks away so that your dog doesn't practice taking that sock. Number 2, put your dog in an area where it's only got things that they're allowed to have in their mouth, right? So put it away because your dog's not trained yet. Your dog's not hearing your cue and dropping something out of their mouth. For that reason, they should not have access to your socks and shoes, whatever it is that they're taking. Until your dog is trained, you are responsible for managing your dog, managing their environment, managing what they're allowed to put in their mouth by setting them up for success in your area. A 1-year-old dog may be trained to do a lot of things, but if they're stealing socks, we have to manage that until the dog is completely trained. All right, so what do you train? So you've got to get management in place. If your dog gets to practice taking socks and running away, they're going to get really good at it. And then you've got a really bad issue. You've got a problem that's going to take longer and longer to try to alter. So next is, what do you train instead? So Carol, you want to train a really good drop, meaning that you say this word and your dog spits it out of their mouth. Now, there's lots of different ways to train drop, but you did do one example of it, which was you did a food trade. You can play a game of toy trade where you get 2 equal toys. You can even grab a large sock and put a knot in it, grab 2 socks and start to play the toy trade game where you get your dog to engage with one toy and then offer the other toy in exchange. And when they're spitting that thing out of their mouth, that is your drop. From there, you can then put that behavior on a cue. And with lots of practice, your dog will hear your signal of drop, whether it's a voice cue or whatever, and then they'll spit it out of their mouth. So the reward needs to come from you. So think about it as a puppy. They're going, well, if I take this out of my mouth, what do I get instead? That is what you want them to think until eventually it becomes a game or it becomes something that they enjoy doing, which is dropping. So I play toy drop with my dog Bandit, who is 1.5 all the time, because sometimes he does put something in his mouth that I have on the ground. Sometimes he will, out of the blue, take a tennis ball and start shredding it. And I'm like, what are you doing? But I'll just say drop and he'll come back over to me and I'll give him a more appropriate toy. All right. So that's the training wise. Another one that I would suggest training is a go to mat or go to a place so that your dog, so that you can do that exchange a little bit better. You don't want to run after your dog. So if you're cueing them to go to a specific spot, it'll be easier to be able to do that trade. So go to a mat, go to a table, go to a pedestal, like whatever you want to train, as you're telling them to go to this one spot and they go, even if they still have it in their mouth. Okay, so drop it, go to your spot. The third one would be also a leave it. If you've got socks on the ground or you accidentally dropped them before your dog puts it in the mouth, you want them to basically do a U-turn, look back at you or come back to you instead of grabbing that sock. So if you've got small children, this is another one that we teach, is when the kids throw something on the ground from a higher spot, that the dog learns to either leave it when you cue it or an automatic leave it. All right. So those are the 3 things I would train. You want to train to a very, very high level with lots of distractions eventually, but you're going to want to do many practice sessions of those three things. So drop, leave it, go to your spot, and the leave it could be either leave it or come back to me. So you could also do a recall there. All right, Carol. So that was your question. I do like that you said when you traded the object, your dog did happen to spit it out. That is what you're going to want to practice a lot more frequently. Also, one more thing, just in case, I don't know this, but if I was asking you a bunch of questions, just in case, if you present your hand and your dog is not coming towards you, your dog might actually be thinking your hand is always going to grab something. So perhaps do some hand feeding every once in a while to build more value in your hand so that your hand doesn't look like this big claw coming to pull something out of their mouth, to change their association. All right, so that was Carol's question about guarding. Next question is a big one we have from Leah, who says, seeing other dogs. So when I asked the question, what is your biggest challenge? It was seeing other dogs. So she says she's good on leash. Seeing people is exciting, but she stays relatively calm and can be redirected. So you understand what redirecting means. Awesome. If we see another dog up close, for example, the vet office, I can hardly control her. So I did have a chance to ask her a few more questions of what distance is up close, what does hardly control actually look like, and is it only dogs or is it other items as well? She mentioned that it was basically at the vet and anyone that's a pretty close, just a few feet away. So I'm saying less than 10 feet, I'm assuming. And she did say that one time there was a dog on the other side of the street and her dog began to pull really hard on the leash, whimpering until we got out of sight. Okay, so let's answer that question. All right. So we have coming from a place of understanding. So we've got what I would call an overreactive response. She's overly reacting, right? So when you have a dog that overreacts, and we've got Angus, also 90-pound dog, pretty hard to manage on leash, also likes to bark, which seems common for his breed. Also enthusiastic. So same thing. So this is going to answer both of you guys. The reaction that she is eliciting right there at that moment is a natural reaction, meaning she's not trying to make you upset. I want you to know that. Like, understand she's coming from a place of this just has to happen. If the over the top response is typical, like if it happens every time she sees this trigger, we would call that an overreactive response, meaning she's just a little over the top. And we would want to change her approach, change the way that she's communicating. So when a dog lunges, barks, whines, they're just simply communicating. Now, as humans, as we get to communicate a little differently, we use our words, right? We learn vocabulary and we can say to someone, hey, can you slow down a little bit? You're coming a little too close. Or, hey, come here, I want to say hi. So we can do this, which is a universal, stop and come here. Now, dog doesn't have the option to do that, but we can teach them that. Right now, she's reacting with a response that feels good for her, and it might have worked. So if you come from a place of understanding, you go, okay, so it's a natural response. Adolescent dogs, and your dog is in that adolescent stage, anywhere from pre-adolescence, so we say 16 weeks, all the way to adults can be up to 2 years old before they turn into adult. Put Lucy back on here. Let's see what she's doing. Oh, okay. She's almost awake. There we go. Sorry. So if we go into adolescence, their response is typically over the top. They're not capable sometimes of holding the way they feel in a way that you would probably like and prefer. Perhaps it's also a learned response, meaning that maybe your dog learned that when she acts this way, she gets what she wants. Meaning your dog is asking for space, right? To be farther away. So she's pulling away. Or in some cases, dogs pull towards the other dog. Both are overreactive. It's just way too much, over the top. Pulling away tells me she wants more space from that dog. Now, why? Could be all kinds of reasons. She could have had a bad experience. She's not ready for it. She's internally not feeling good. So if she's not been spayed or altered, if it's a male dog, then they might be feeling threatened, right? They might be just not feeling well. Have you ever been sick and you're just like, can I just have some space? So why? Could be learned, could be not feeling well. When a dog pulls on leash and says, I want to meet that dog, it's still overly excited. And when you let a dog that goes full charge on the end of their leash towards another dog, usually bad things happen. Usually there's some kind of explosion, right? Barking, lunging, pulling, whining are all signs of stress. And now it could be stress of being overly excited, or it could be stress of I need more space. Whatever it is, it's still stress signal to us. And for that reason, we have to go, how do I manage this situation? Right? So things that you want to figure out is, what is the trigger exactly? What is it? Is it every dog? Is it certain dogs? So let's just say you've identified the trigger to be dogs that are within 10 feet, all large dogs that are within 10 feet. Fine, write that down. Large dogs, 10 feet. Then you're going to go, how do I manage? And now, by the way, this is for dogs that are overly excited, lunging and barking, pulling towards or away. It doesn't matter which direction they're going. The response, what they're doing, the reaction that they have towards that trigger, which in this case is another dog, is over the top. For that reason, what is the trigger? Write it down and then manage it. They're not trained. They're not completely trained. So you will need to manage your environment. So if in this case, if we talk about a dog across the street, you could say there's a dog across the street. Before my dog overreacts, I'm going to create more space. Typically, it's more space of about 10 feet away each time. Or you can hide behind a car, but manage your dog's sight of the trigger so that they don't overreact. The moment that they get to practice lunging, barking, whining, and pulling on leash, the better they get at it. So I can't stress this enough, before your dog overreacts, create the space, manage the situation, use a car, hide behind a trash can, go up a driveway and turn your dog's head in some way, right? In training, if you're working with us privately, we have lots of drills that we do, or patterns that we have your dog go through to help get rid of that, avoid that trigger at that kind of proximity. So manage the situation. When you're in a vet office specifically, how do you manage that? Well, a couple things that you can do. You know that if you walk into a vet office and the dogs are all within 10 feet, your dog is going to overreact. You've already said that. So, and your dog's not trained to just walk in. So you're going to set your dog up for success by calling the vet, telling them, hey, I would love for you to text or call me when my appointment's ready. And so you want to call them ahead of time. They can text you and say it's clear. And then also let them know, is there a back door? Is there another way that I can go in to make sure my dog, is not having to spend much time in the lobby? So if you've got a dog that's overreactive and with the presence of other dogs, don't have them sit there and wait for your appointment. Go check in and then take your dog out in the parking lot and do something else, right? Get them away from that inside that facility till it's time for your appointment. Then at that time, most of the people in the vet office, most vet offices, and if they're not, then you probably need to find one, are going to want to keep the threshold of everyone, every dog inside their facility more calm. So they're going to usually go out of their way to help you. Sometimes they can ask the pet parents that are in the lobby if they don't mind moving away. They can put up a sheet. They can do things to get you to where you need to go, point A to point B. All right, enough with management. If you have any questions about management, feel free to drop them in. After you understand management, what do you do to help change the way your dog feels about this trigger? So changing their emotional response. Now, I worked with a couple people this last week on this exact thing. If your dog is telling you they need space from a specific trigger, like another dog, they're telling you that I don't have enough time to process the information about this dog. Sometimes the leash itself causes the dog to be all tense because they don't have control of their space, right? That's why a lot of dogs will do better when they're off leash. I'm not telling you to go off leash, but I'm letting you know why this can happen. So as far as your goal is teaching your dog that that not all dogs are social or not all dogs are dangerous. So training wise, you would want to set yourself up for your dog to see and be at a proximity where your dog can take the information in. So for example, now this all depends, and what we would train really depends on what we can gather as far as information, but I'm going to give you a few examples. If you're in a neighborhood and you've got dogs, walking away from you, one thing you can do is give your dog the opportunity to follow. So have that dog about 40, 50 feet away where your dog is not overreacting. Put your dog on leash and follow someone in front of you, right? If you notice that your dog starts to continue to move towards that walk, following and sniffing the ground, trying to discover what that dog is about that just passed, that's good information. That's a slow enough process for that dog to be able to process the information and decide whether they're safe or not safe. What you don't want to do is force the dog to go say hi. In this case, you want your dog to process the information and go slower. Now, in a training world, we would set your dog up with other well-mannered dogs. Let's see if they're both up here. Oh, they're both up here. Look at this. Oh my goodness. There they are. So Bandit works with my puppies, and his approach is he'll come, with a curved body, and he'll let the other dog sniff his behind. He'll come a little slow with puppies. And Bentley works with reactive dogs, and I typically will turn his body so that he is not facing the dog from a distance of sometimes 100 feet away. And we begin the training that way. So we begin to allow the dog that's having this overreactive response to meet another dog from a distance on their own terms. All right, Leah. So that's what it's going to take to change the way that your dog feels. Is it needs to happen on their own terms without the force and without a lot of, pushing really hard. So keep the space for now and see if you can get some training setups where you're having your dog exposed to other dogs from a distance. Another option is if you have a park that's got a fenced in area where dogs play, you can work with your dog from a distance. So imagine that if you always went to that park and you started to work on, focus drills and loose leash walking, things where you're using your dog's toys, play, and you're using their food, they might change the way they feel about the sight of another dog. All right. So the level of that training needs to be kind of planned out. So I just would like to say, first of all, just to come from a place of understanding and set up management so that your dog's not practicing that pretty often. Now, as far as Wendy, I would say that if your dog is overreacting and barking out of really close proximity, start to step back a little bit further. You're just way too close. You don't want to go from 40 feet to 20 feet. You really want to go 40 feet, sometimes 35. Progress a little slower, and you might notice more success when your dog has a chance to process the information. Keep your dog away from other dogs that are also overreacting, because then it becomes this battle. Instead, see if you can set up training sessions with other dogs that are well behaved, maybe someone that's practicing their service dog, public access training, somewhere where your dog can see those dogs at a distance and not feel threatened or overly excited. All right. So that is to answer your question, Leah, about dogs at close proximity. Okay, so moving on to LaShawn's question. Distracted with all animals when walking and begins to pull, whimper, or won't move at all. Won't move. Okay, and then there was another one, jumping when visitors. Okay, so same thing. Jax is 1 year old, Australian Labradoodle, right in the middle of adolescence and pretty far away from adulthood. Although he's very well trained, when he goes into training mode, when he's given the opportunity to explore an environment, you want him to be able to do that in a place that's got less distractions at first. All right. So when you're trying to go on a walk, I would say try to go out without the kids and work specifically with Jax. So Jax, go out there, put him on a line and let him sniff the environment at first. Then after 15, 20 minutes, he's gone to the bathroom and he's ready. You can do a couple sessions of his loose leash walk training and walk on the sidewalk, walk and sit at the curb and release and all of that stuff. But when you see another dog, create more space, because he can walk across and next to dogs within 10 feet if he's in training mode. But if he thinks that he's going to see a dog and get the opportunity to play, he might respond with an overly reactive response, which is what I was just talking about with the other comments that I just went through. So create space. So why would this be happening? Because he usually gets to play with other dogs and it's exciting for him, and he's adolescent and unable to control those emotions. So it comes out like overly the top. So in this case, if he's not allowed to go play with that dog that he sees, then you should really want to be walking on by, going past the dog. Yes, he might stop because he wants to see if this is a potential dog that he can play with. In this case, as far as training goes, a good leave it or let's go to tell him, hey, we're not playing over here, leave that dog alone, would be good for you to do. So make sure you have that behavior trained on cue before you actually need it. So some good eye contact or let's go is the cue that we use in school for him that gets him back to walking. Bring your dog's meal when you're out in the environment, especially in your neighborhood, and practice your loose leash walking in your neighborhood. So I would do that. I think we called it red light, green light, where you let your dog sniff for one whole house distance, and the next house you do loose leash walking and go from sniff and go. So when he's done sniffing, let's go, and then walk to the next house. All right. Next one is, let me see, what was the last one? No, this wasn't the last one. Okay, jumping. So I'm assuming jumping when visitors come over. Okay, and I think we have another one for jumping when visitors come over. Great question. So jumping when visitors come over. If you come from a place of why, understand why this is happening, let's pop some ideas. So one could be something that the dog learned that worked. If I jump on this person, one, they go away, or two, they start putting their hands on me, right? They start petting me. They start giving me love, whatever that is. Sometimes you can accidentally reinforce it by pushing your dog. Sometimes you'll push your dog off of you, and then they'll be like, oh, he touched me. And then it becomes something that your dog learned, right? And typically we see this a lot in the adolescent going into something a lot with small dogs specifically. So something that your dog learned. It could be something that your dog naturally does, right? They like to jump on people. They like it, like the way it feels. Or like I said, it could cause the person to move back, which might be what they want as well. So to answer this question on understanding why, basically it works. Most dogs that jump, it works for whatever reason, why they're doing it. When they jump, they get reinforced for it. So what is the trigger in this case? I'm assuming people walking into your home, right? So that is what we would call the trigger that's causing this response of jumping. So then we go, how do we manage it? Well, it just tells me that if your dog is jumping on someone when they walk in the house, they are not trained to be able to have access to the trigger. So you're going to need to set up management. Most dogs, well, this particular case, this dog actually has some behaviors that you can use. You just need to practice it. So think about the pattern that you want your dog to learn. We want your dog to learn that when someone comes to the door, whether it's the doorbell ring or the knock, or they've texted you and they're walking through. So when they hear that door open, your dog really needs to go somewhere else. They need to come to far away at a distance where your dog doesn't get a chance to jump on them. So management could be a leash that's attached to your door that you grab every time someone's about to walk in. Hold on, I'll be right there. And then you leash your dog. It could be putting your dog on a settle mat. So cueing your dog to go over to a specific spot. And if they're not able to stay there while you go open the door, then you're going to need to manage that as well. So you can set up a mat where your door is, and then you can put even a little leash that's attached to the door, and you can attach them there. So you can tether them to a spot so that you can go open the door. Another option is to put them in their X pen or in their space because so that they don't, have the opportunity to run. So you're going to need to set up management. Then I'm going to give you the skills that you'll want to train with your dog. So set up management so the jumping doesn't continue to happen. Because like I said before, once they start jumping, they're going to always continue to jump because it's a learned behavior and they get reinforced for it. So what do you want to train your dog to do? Go to a spot. Someone's here. Go to your spot. You want to train them to go to a spot at a distance with all kinds of distractions, the door opening, the FedEx, like you want to practice when someone's at the door, go to your spot. Number one. Number two is 4 paws on the floor. You don't have to cue a sit, but from paws up to off, you want to make sure that your dog understands that 4 paws on the floor pays off. There's several different training skills that you can teach, but bottom line is that 4 paws stay on the floor, gets rewarded, and 2 paws up doesn't. So begin to train 4 paws down. You can also cue your dog to sit. If your dog doesn't have any injuries and feels comfortable going into a sit, the moment that your dog comes towards you, one of the games that we practice with little puppies like this. Oh, she's on her back now. How cute is that? What I'll practice with her is I'll put her in this gate and I'll walk over to the gate and I'll cue a sit. The moment that she does, I mark, I reward her through the gate, and then I walk away and I repeat. Sometimes I'll run over to the gate. Sometimes I'll do jumping jacks and come over to the gate. But I'm using that gate as my management tool to prevent being jumped on. Once your dog has played that game, the next thing you can do is take your dog out to like the front of the backyard where you have plenty of space and run away, turn around. And when your dog follows, you can cue a sit. So as your dog's running towards you, cue a sit so that they learn to as they come towards you, sit, and then you can reward. So you want to reward a lot of sits, a lot of stands, go to your spot. And I would say practice that in the presence of a door. All right. So that was for visitors. Okay, I've got 2 more, and then I'm going to exit for our first episode, which will be on YouTube on chapters, so you can watch this a little bit later. You can also share it with anybody that's got a puppy that maybe has these kind of questions. So here we have from Deanie, so many. Here we go. So Bonnie is a puppy, continues to get in Bella. Bella is her older dog's face, Bella is probably 2 years old now. Bella is good with her. So the older dog is good with the puppy to a point, but we put her on leash when Bella is resting and she won't leave her alone. Okay. So basically what you're saying, Deanie, that is the dream, right? You see my 2 dogs, Bandit and Bentley, together laying, touching each other. That is the dream. That is not what it looked like for the first 8 months. Okay. I don't think Bonnie is 8 months yet, but that tells me, well, let me finish reading this. She also is super aggressive taking treats. Okay. So let's start with the first one. Bonnie won't leave. So your puppy won't leave your older dog alone and is constantly in her face. So what would Bella, your older dog, learn? We'll learn that Bonnie is annoying. We'll learn to not really like her. We'll learn to avoid her. We'll learn to move away from her. And what will Bonnie learn from that? Bonnie will learn to try harder. Your puppy will learn to try harder, try a different approach, see what else works, right? She's also just way too close to contact. Bonnie needs to learn to be on her own and let Bella come over. So Bonnie should be in an X pen like this, or managed in a way. So we talk about management, right? Managed in a way so that your older dog can approach her when she's calm. This is what would teach your puppy to be more calm, is if she doesn't have access to Bella, specifically her face and specifically her. So the leash may not be enough. And if the leash isn't enough, then you might want to either go with a shorter leash or just move them farther apart. Bella, your older dog, should have enough space to completely move out of the room. And just so that Bella continues to bond with you and you not be the source of Bonnie, you want to take turns and let Bonnie stay in her penned area while you spend some time with Bella doing some training or things that she likes. All right. Another thing that you can do to help, so that's management, right? So how do you change the way they feel? Well, most likely good interactions that are short and positive is going to change the way they feel about each other. So I did training with Bandit one-on-one while Bentley was managed, like behind a gate. And I would reward Bentley, my older dog, Bentley, higher reinforcements while I was training Bandit. So he would see Bandit moving with me, but he would get some really good, yummy stuff. So he's watching this interaction, but he's being rewarded with something that he likes, whether it's a chew or something like that, when I was working with Bandit when he was a puppy. So his emotional response to this was, it's not so bad, right? The second thing is I constantly manage how much space between my puppy and my older dog. So my puppy, Bandit, really never got to touch Bentley until he was much older. And Bentley, so when I noticed Bentley started to come over and hang out next to Bandit, whether he was in his X pen or while I was training with him, I noticed that, okay, he's wanting to get to know him a little bit more. The other thing is when you do play sessions, take them outside, giving them an opportunity to play and have a good experience. Keep those sessions nice and short. So 3 to 5 minutes. Then Bonnie comes back over to you, give her a short break, let Bella do her sniffing and things like that. There's nothing more annoying for an older dog that wants to go sniff than a puppy trying to get in their face and play. So those are two things that I would do to help change the emotional response to the way they feel about each other. We know how Bonnie feels about Bella, but Bella needs more space and time. Now, there will be a point, if you do this correctly, if you do it slow and you give them more space, there'll be a point where all of a sudden they're cool. It's Bonnie's learned to calm down. So Bonnie's still a puppy. Your puppy's still a puppy. So as soon as she learns to calm down a little more, Bella will start to actually probably appreciate her. Bella is an adult now. I think she's over 2 years old. So she likes things to go high, but she likes a lot of low too, especially being an Aussie Doodle. All right. Next one is the puppy is super aggressive about taking treats, meaning she's probably chomping really fast. We see this a lot with labs and not very often with small dogs. So the way that you present your treat to your dog you need to be really careful. So a lot of times you want to present the treat in the middle of your hand, not use your fingers where your dog's trying to find it. She's also a really, really small dog. So she is, she's most likely, you're tall and she's really small. You're taking a long time to get all the way down there. We find that dogs are fast about taking their food is they don't have a lot of impulse control. So a couple of things you can do, because I don't want you to get hurt, is I don't have it with me, but I use a little tiny bowl for this particular puppy, Miss Lucy Pearl. I use a bowl when I sometimes feed her. And that's because instead of throwing food on the floor, because she's so tiny, I place it in a bowl. So I release her and then I place it in the bowl. So to make sure that your hands don't get chomped on, you can place the reinforcement in a plate or bowl that she starts to recognize if this is where I'm going to take it. You can teach gentle, but it might be a little bit hard at this age. So one of the things is if you want her to take food, make sure that you're not using your fingers because she'll chomp down on it. Instead, just place it with your fingers close. You can place it right there in the middle of your hand. She still has really, really sharp teeth. So that's what you're feeling. You're feeling like, she's taking it really quick. Now, typically in training, I'll usually hide the food right between my thumb and my finger. Or if I've got it in my hand, I'll hide it right here and so that I can slide the food down. But you want to give her more space for her to take her food than just seeing these little tiny fingers for her. Okay. She's feeling like she needs to get it. So it's the speed of your delivery typically and how you're presenting it. So to keep things safe for now, try using a bowl to reward her. And if you're going to be using your hand, just place the treat. So she'll see you place the treat on your hand and you present it to her that way, where she takes it from the palm of your hand. All right. We can give you some other training skills for taking food gentle a little bit later on, but hopefully that's a good start. Okay. Next question. Bella getting to her mat. She just sits or lays where she is. I still have to guide her. Okay, so you're teaching your dog how to go to a mat. If your dog is not motivated to get on her mat, it could be a lot of different reasons. It could be the mat itself. It could be where you've placed it. So if you placed it in an area that she's, for whatever reason, doesn't have a comfortable feeling about, the motivator that you're using to reward her is not high enough value. So if your dog, like Bella, loves to play, grab a mat and cue her to get on the mat, then reward her with play coming away from the mat. So one of the ways you can start to build more value is to use the mat in your training when you're training something else so that she can attach just training period or waiting for the higher value thing to come out. All right. So if you're having to use a hand signal, every time and you want to turn it to a verbal cue, there's something with that transition that you've missed and you're going to need to go back through those steps again. You might even want to retrain it and use a different verbal cue. Okay. Last one I have is Karen, over sniffing. So I think we've encouraged the sniff walk so much that we can't get her anywhere. Oh my gosh, I hear this quite a bit. At least how to break away from a sniff walk without hating me and into a focused walk without stopping. Okay, so you've got a sniffari, which is amazing. Thank you, Karen, for doing that for your dog. If it was up to her, this would be exactly what she'd really want. The dream life of a dog would be able to just go out and sniff whatever they want. Okay, but you've got to get home and you've got things to do. Totally get it. So here's what I would say. Sniffari, loose leash walking, heel walk are 3 different types of walks, right? Practicing more loose leash walking can help encourage your dog to learn the difference between a sniff walk and loose leash walking. So here's what I would say to you, because Karen, I know you guys, so I'm just going to give you some really good tips. Letting her sniff, set your timer for 10 to 15 minutes until she's sniffed a few things, gone to the bathroom, and especially if she's in a new environment. So if you've gone to a new location. After that, pull out her meal, put it in your treat pouch, and practice your loose leash walking. Now, the loose leash walking, I would do at home first or your back or front yard. But then when you wander off, practice that loose leash walking skill in that environment. So she goes from sniff to let's go and do 10 repetitions in a row of loose leash walking. Enough to walk, if you're in the neighborhood, enough to walk at least one whole house distance. Then go sniff. So we call this, again, I think I said it earlier, it's called sniff and go. It's the transition between new environment, dog that's learning that's not so scary, to teaching your dog to walk on a loose leash. So practice your loose leash walking skills, 8 to 10 repetitions at a time, and then reward with the go sniff. So go sniff for one house, let's go, and start doing your loose leash walking where you're rewarding in the same place 10 times in a row as you walk. Go sniff, let's go. So by training those 2 things on a cue, your dog recognizes when they could sniff and when it's time to walk from point A to point B. So practice your loose leash walking there. Now, as she gets better at this, you can start to expand how much time you're doing loose leash walking. Now, loose leash walking is different than heel walk. So be sure that you are practicing just the loose leash walking where she's being rewarded for staying on a loose leash. So then you can go to 2 houses, then 3 houses. Now I have a golden retriever I am training that's 3 years old that would not walk in the neighborhood. And what we've done, loves to sniff though. What we've done is now I can walk an entire block, and then the reward is sniffing. There's no food at all involved. It's walk with me from point A to point B. We got this. Let's do this. You got this. Hey, hey, hey. And then reward for sniffing. Now, gradually you can work up to 1, 2 miles, 3 miles of your dog walking really nicely on leash, and every once in a while reward them with a go sniff. All right. It's a great opportunity for them to do what they want to do. Remember that these walks are typically for your dog's only opportunity to get out of the house. Now, as a human, we get to drive in our cars and go to point A to point B, wherever we want to go. But for our dogs, this walk really needs to be theirs. So combine the 2 and use the sniff eventually as your reinforcement. So you'll practice your loose leash walking with your higher reinforcement now. So it could be food, it could be a play, a tug, or whatever that is. But eventually work to doing sniff and let's go. All right, guys. So that is the end of our first episode. I will be dropping in another question, a spot for you guys to drop in your questions. I did have one person show up and ask a question live. So I'm going to answer this question from Kaylee. It says, how do I help my dog stop barking? I've tried so many things, but she still barks at everything. She'll be a year, February 8th. Any advice? Okay. So what I would say to you for barking, come from a place of, first of all, why? Understand, why is your dog barking? Well, barking could be genetics. Some dogs love to bark. Barking can happen because it reinforces a behavior. So, for example, they bark and a learned response. So they bark and they're barking at the window and the mailman goes away and your dog's mind, oh my God, it worked. The barking actually worked. So it can be a learned behavior that barking works. It could be genetics that they bark and it feels good. It could be attention seeking, but it is just communication. Barking is the way a dog communicates. They don't speak the same language as we do, and some dogs bark more than others. Now, what I would say, if you want to alter the barking, choose the barking that is the most, I don't want to say detrimental, but the one that annoys you the most, right? So let's say we have a dog that barks in the house and we have a dog that barks outside. I would say let's start with the barking inside the house and let's find out what the trigger is. So if your dog is barking for absolutely all day, then I would say let's go make sure that there's nothing medically wrong. But if your dog hears, smells, sees, feels something and barks, whatever it is that they're seeing, hearing, smelling, or feeling is called the trigger. And that trigger is causing the receiving. Once you know what the trigger is, you can begin to put a training plan together. So these are the questions that we ask, give me the scenario of when you hear your dog bark. How long is the bark? What happens when the trigger goes away? So those are the kind of questions you want to start to ask yourself. Then the next thing you want to know is, how do you manage this? So how can I avoid this trigger from being in my dog's space where they begin to bark? So how do you manage it? So there's lots of different ways, and it all depends on the one barking trigger that you want to start off with. So if it's when visitors arrive, when the doorbell rings, you can say the doorbell is the trigger. How do I manage the doorbell not ringing because my dog is not currently trained? I would say, put a sign on your door, tell them to text you instead. So manage it so that your dog doesn't get really good at barking. The next thing is, what do you do to train it? So once you know what the trigger is that's causing the barking, you're going to take that trigger and you're going to make it smaller. So if it's a sound, you're going to make the volume lower of the sound of the doorbell, let's just say. If it's let's just say something real. So let's just say your dog hears a dog barking in a distance and your dog barks. The trigger is the dog barking at a distance. The response is the barking. Now I'm talking in as pet parent friendly terms as I can, just so that you comprehend the information. Barking, response, is the response. Trigger is the dog's barking at a distance. So what you would do here is you would take that sound trigger that's causing the barking and you'd make that sound lower volume to where your dog, what we call desensitizing the sound, to where your dog hears that but doesn't respond with the barking. Okay, so we would want to desensitize that trigger and find the level where your dog does not respond with barking before the bark. And that's where you would begin the training. From there, we counter condition, we change the way your dog feels about that sound. So whether it's the sound to go away. So it is a little more complex training program, but I wanted you to understand that there are several steps. So my response to you, and this is also for Jen, when it comes to barking, find out what the trigger is. So what did your dog hear, see, smell, or feel, or taste that caused the barking? And then ask yourself, how do I manage it? Once you can respond to that, Kaylee, then I can put together some tips for you. But basically, it's once you figure out what the trigger is, we're going to lessen that trigger and make your dog less sensitive to the sound. So we've done this a lot for 4th of July. In fact, I think I might actually have a video here. Yeah, counter conditioning. Here we go. So let me play this video. So here we're playing the sound of fireworks, which elicits normally a trigger of a dog barking. And after the dog is less sensitive to the sound of fireworks, we're playing something fun. In this case, toy fetch, training, doing fun things while the sound that normally causes a dog to bark is going on. So this is called desensitization and counter conditioning. We're changing the way the dog feels about that sound. After a couple minutes, we'll play that sound a little louder and the volume will go up. So here they're training. And that's kind of what happens. That's kind of what you would do with a dog that barks because of a trigger. We want to find out what the trigger is, and then we want to change the way that they feel about that trigger. Barking is normally a line of communication. It's also just a little bit over threshold. Okay, I think that is it. That wraps it up for our first episode. So drop in your questions for next month, for February. Looking forward to hearing from all of you. Let us know if this was helpful. Take care and have a wonderful February. Looking forward to a fun month. Bye for now.